Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is Mike O'Donnell. I'm a councillor with the City of Regina and a member of the SUMA board. And I'm very proud that you would come and spend a little time with us this afternoon to learn something else. So good on you. I want you, and I hope that what you had is a chance to get a refreshment at break time here. We're fortunate that a number of companies have stepped forward to sponsor those things so that it is a kind thing where we can meet one another but also have something to share in terms of beverage. And the company that did that was AECom. So if you go through the trade show later on, I'd be grateful if you would say thanks to them for doing so. Before I actually introduce the session, I'd like to introduce one of our staff to you. And I'm going to get Stephen to stand. So what happened, I think about a year ago, Stephen joined SUMA staff, and he is a lawyer. He was in private practice before. And so Stephen has been getting some questions from a variety of our members about how we do things, why we do things, and by the way, how do we look after some of the problems. And so I wanted Stephen to stand so you could see him. Perhaps you have a chance to meet him later on, but he is in the office and he takes those legal questions. And I want to welcome Stephen and thank him for his efforts so far. So, thanks. So I met our presenter a few minutes ago and we had a chat and we agree on one thing. We'd like to kind of take the formality down a notch or two. So while he's doing his presentation, the microphone is on and he's okay if you step up to the mic. He'll pause, and if there's something that's being talked about that is current on your mind, he'll take a question at that time and we'll keep the flow going that way. But at the same time, if you want to wait till after he's done, we'll take questions. So we're going to go halfway or during, or we're going to take right at the end questions. We've agreed to that, Matthew?
Perfect, yep.
Right, thank you. So you'll note that I'm speaking into a microphone and I'm asking you to do the same. And when you come to the microphone, if you don't mind using your name and the community that you represent, because this is all being recorded. And if you would like to get a copy of this later on or somebody else from your council, then we have all of that recorded. So thanks. Thanks for that. So this is the heart of the matter, reducing crime with regional hubs. Regional hubs are a holistic approach to reducing crime. They bring together advocates from enforcement, social services, and health with a variety of other care workers to determine solutions to rehabilitate offenders rather than merely punishing them. The session will explore the province's new hub strategy, including an overview of the pilot projects already completed and a roadmap of future hubs. Our presenter today is a gentleman named Matthew Gray. Matthew is a member of the Prince Albert Police Service, currently under secondment as a consultant, to the Government of Saskatchewan Ministry of Justice, building partnerships to reduce crime. With 16 years of policing service with the Prince Albert and the Edmonton Police Services, Matthew has worked in various aspects of law enforcement, specializing in crisis negotiation and incident command, and has participated in several community policing initiatives. It is his participation in the development of community mobilization Prince Albert and the nationally recognized hub model, however, that has been his career highlight. Would you please welcome Matthew?
Thank you very much, Mike. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm not going to use the same joke as I used on the first group. I told them that there was going to be a role play session and that we needed to identify who was going to be the actors, and then a few people grabbed their jackets and bags, and I said, no role playing. I will echo what Mike said. I typically don't present to people as much as I do speak with them. I would appreciate any questions. I invite anybody to ask what's on their mind or even challenge something that I have maybe said. And the reason for that is because I've been part of Community Mobilization Prince Albert and this whole hub project right from day one, and I can tell you that the only reason we got going and the only reason that we have a product that I believe is as strong as it is because of challenges, because of people saying, whoa, what did you just say and what did you mean by that? Or, I disagree, have you considered? So by all means, ask whatever you want, ask it whenever you want, it is being recorded, so the folks are asking that you use the microphone, and by all means. So just to introduce myself a little more, I have, as Mike said, I've been a police officer for 16, 17 years in Prince Albert as well as Edmonton. And one of the things that really struck me coming back to Prince Albert from Edmonton is how crime, criminals, marginalization, it's consistent. It's not identical, but it's consistent. People in certain circumstances, in many cases, not all cases, but many cases, revert to the same risks. So that being said, then why couldn't we then apply some new methodologies and some new things that are going on in other places of the world to address that? And I'll speak on that a little bit more, on the inception of the hub and how it came to be. To start, though, just to kind of set the table for, I guess, today's theme, it's a quick 2-minute video clip. I just want to describe it a little bit beforehand, because I don't know anybody in the room and I don't know their personal circumstances. It uses a river and it uses people drowning in a river as a metaphor. It's not graphic, it's not, you know, highly emotional, but if there's anybody that's not okay with that, or because of certain experiences are not okay with that, I won't show it. So if everyone's okay, I will. I'll begin with it. Okay? All right.
It was many years ago when the villagers downstream recall spotting the first bodies in the river. Some old-timers remember how Spartan were the facilities to manage that sort of thing. Sometimes, they say, it would take hours to pull 10 bodies from the river, and even then only a few would survive. Though the number of victims in the river have increased greatly in recent years, the good folks downstream have responded admirably to the challenge. Their rescue system is clearly second to none. Most people discovered in the swirling waters are reached within 20 minutes, and many in less than 10. Only a small number drown each day before help arrives, a big improvement from the way it used to be. Talk to the people downstream and they'll speak with pride about the new hospital by the edge of the water, the flotilla of rescue boats ready for service at a moment's notice, the comprehensive health plans for coordinating all manpower involved, and the large number of highly trained and dedicated swimmers always ready to risk their lives to save victims from the raging currents. Sure, it costs a lot, but, say the downstreamers, what else can decent people do except to provide whatever is necessary when human lives are at stake? Oh, a few people downstream have asked the question now and again, but most folks show little interest in what's happening upstream. It seems there's so much to do to help those in the river that nobody's got time to check how all those bodies are getting there in the first place. That's the way things are, sometimes.
So one of the things that I kind of want to reiterate or remind folks throughout is one of the things we're hoping to accomplish with building partnerships to reduce crime is that whole notion of upstream versus downstream. I can tell you, having worked in policing for 16 years and seeing and working with some really, really good people in other systems, education, social services, health, people work really well and really hard in the back end, downstream. So the treatment, in policing, it's the prosecution, it's the preparation of court, it's the public safety thing. People work really well and they work really hard downstream. But something's already happened downstream. Something has already happened, somebody has already been victimized, or something bad has already happened in order for the system traditionally to engage itself. And that is what we're kind of trying to get intervening on earlier with Be PRC. We're going to talk about the hub model today in particular, but it's more than the hub model. The hub model is one, and it's one that's gotten a lot of notoriety, and I'm quite proud of it. A lot of work has gone into it, and a lot more continues to go into it. Probably won't ever stop. But that's the theme I want to really impart before you leave today is we are going to have much better results for the clients, for the system, and for the financiers the earlier we intervene in people in certain situations. So that being said, a little bit of background. The origin of building partnerships to reduce crime. In 07-09, consultations provincially toward a shared vision for policing. Quite frankly, the province saw the way things were trending. Crime was going down, but costs were going up. And they were looking for something else to tackle the issue of policing without just throwing more money at it. What can we do differently? What can we do to supplement the work that's going on? Because the work that's going on traditionally still has to happen, still have to treat people. But what else can we do to pick kind of the low-hanging fruit, for lack of a better term, so that they don't enter into the system in the first place? So 2009, Future Policing report tabled to Cabinet, and the response in 2010, formation by Human Service Deputy Ministers and police leaders a charter commitment. And what they said was, yeah, we're willing to work together. We're not quite sure how yet, but we are committed to it. We're going to do it. And in 2011, release of a Premier's multidisciplinary research-based public document, Building Partnerships to Reduce Crime. Now, Building Partnerships to Reduce Crime, or the Be PRC acronym, it's a little bit tough to pin down what exactly we are, because I don't even work for government. I work for the PA Police Service. I'm seconded to the government, but I hold all my responsibilities with the police department. The Be PRC is housed in justice, but we're evolving to something more than just crime. We're actually evolving to what we like to term as community safety and wellness. We intend to have a crime prevention benefit, because quite frankly, when people are taken out of the high-risk situations and they are connected with some services and they are kind of taking control, back control of their lives to a degree, there is a crime reduction benefit to that. Hopefully, we take the crime out of the moniker at some point, because quite frankly, crime is just one. It was born out of crime prevention, but we are about every system, every agency working together and picking some of these folks and these situations off before they have tragedy happen to them. So I'll read that to you, because it's a little hard to see probably from the back, from Premier Brad Wall, a quote that says, "Everyone deserves a safe environment in which to thrive and prosper. Building partnerships to reduce crime has been created because we need to articulate more than a hope for change. We need to do something about it, and we need to do it together." Now, I've put that up there because it resonated with me, because 16 years between two different police services, I've probably seen and worked in probably 200 different initiatives, and every single one of those was going to change the world. And the difference being is they fizzled. They fizzled for various different reasons. And what I like about this quote from the Premier is, it's not about saying we weren't going to do it, and it's not about saying we need to work together and then just kind of letting somebody else figure it out. That was the challenge to us, the system, to don't just talk about it, do it. Work together, figure it out. And whatever you need, we'll help you. So the BPRC goal, there's many of them, but the initial goal was to reduce crime and victimization in its early stages. And to do that, it adopted a three-pillar approach. And if you can't read them, it says intervention, prevention, and suppression. And I can tell you, having worked in law enforcement, police services, and I'll pick on policing because I belong to it, are really, really good at suppression. We investigate things very well. We provide very, very good court briefs to the prosecutors for prosecutions. And we are trained very, very well. And we're resourced very well for suppression. Prevention, we're pretty good at in policing. We have various initiatives, and other people do, like Saskatoon and Regina have their police and crisis team, outstanding units in policing. That's for where a police officer is paired with a mental health professional, outstanding. You have school liaison officers in high schools, or in many cases even in elementary schools, again, outstanding. But what we really struggle with is this whole third pillar here of intervention. And the reason for that, as far as I can see, having worked in the BPRC and as well as in policing, is policing traditionally is very reactive. Something happens, police go in. Somebody is either hurt or victimized either financially or violently, and we go in after the fact. And again, part of the reason for that is it's very hard to figure out what you're going to do unless you have authority or a mandate. And what I mean by that is, how do you know something is going to go wrong? How do you gaze into a crystal ball and know that that person's going to break the law, or that person's going to fall into crisis, or that person's going to become an addict? And the reason for that is because we all have varying different understandings of what risk is. And I'm going to get back to that in a moment, because the term risk is going to permeate throughout this. So Be PRC, we are not in charge of any of these. I want to make that clear. We don't oversee, we don't scrutinize, we don't stick handle anything. But what we want to do is we want to align some really, really good work going on across the province. So PA Hub, there's more hubs, by the way, and we'll get into that more. There's, I think, 13 in the province now. Regina has an 11 and under strategy that seems to be working really well. And I think they've actually, or are on the kind of the threshold of launching a 12 and over program for high-risk youth. Excellent. Serious violent offender strategy, which is an initiative out of Justice that is going to take serious violent offenders, and it's going to be intensive supervision, and it's going to be a lot more scrutiny on people when they've been released from custody and they are presenting as serious violent offenders. Yeah, excellent. And two things that we're looking for is quality assessment tools and supports, and discipline practices and sustainability. So, like I said before, 200 and some odd initiatives in my career, most of them fizzled. And we're going to speak about this more. Quality assessments, tools, and supports. The challenge to hubs and to other initiatives is show why it's working so that we can either learn from you or we can either carry on forward. And again, finally, a growing and reliable evidence base. We're going to work from evidence. The province, especially Justice, from what I've seen, increased requirement for outcomes. Show us why it's working and show us why it should continue. So the PA Hub started, actually we were about to have our 4-year anniversary on the 4th, so February 4th, 2011. Various representatives from local governments in Prince Albert took a trip to Glasgow, Scotland. And that was funded by the Regional Intersectoral Committee. And the reason they chose Glasgow was coming out of the Future of Policing document. Our chief at the time challenged the consultant to say, where in the world has the same risk variables, the same stuff going on in their community as PA? So at the time, youth, gangs, knife violence, substance abuse, mental health, parenting issues, all types of stuff. And so they settled on two. One was in Glasgow and one was in South Africa, I believe, so they picked Glasgow. And they researched a place called the Govan Hill Hub. It's in, if anybody knows Glasgow, I've never been there, but I've been told it is a real perfect storm of crime, risk, low employment, violence. It's not a great place. But this Govan Hill Hub really drove down some significant numbers, and so it was worth researching. So they went, and they came back and struck the PA Hub. And I'm going to tell you, from being part of the very, very first meeting, it was an unbelievably awkward experience. Sitting at a table with a bunch of strangers from different agencies that I didn't know, and we're going to talk about people that we can prevent from getting into the system. And that's all we knew. We didn't know how we were going to do it. We didn't know what kind of trouble we were going to get in. We didn't know really what to say. So we kind of sat there and we stared at one another, and then it seemed to be one situation that really galvanized people. And I'm going to come back to that at the end. That really kind of showed that this was something worth pursuing. A couple of things I want to say right now. Rather than what a hub is, for now I want to tell you what it's not. A hub is not an entity. It's not a unit or a branch or a subcommittee of some agency. A hub is a forum for discussion. It's a table. It's a place where human service professionals from various human service agencies sit down and they talk about discussions of acutely elevated risk. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more later. But what I want to get across at this point is that the hub doesn't have its own authority. It doesn't have signing authority. It doesn't have endorsement. It's just a meeting. It's a place where people come together to share each other's experiences, their professional opinions, their ethics, their authorities, to deal with situations of acutely elevated risk. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So the hub model, what it does, brings key players together. I have bi-weekly up there, but what we're finding out is that based upon communities' service capacities and a few other variables, if once a week works for them, no problem. That's fine. Deals only with situations of acutely elevated level of risk, rapidly deploy collaborative interventions, mitigate risk, and connect individuals to services. And again, what it does not is it does not fix situations of acutely elevated level of risk, and it does not have cases or perform case management. The first bullet there about fixing situations, there seems to be, with some people, a notion that if you've tried something and it doesn't work the first time, it's not worth pursuing. So for the purposes of a hub discussion or a hub table, if the hub has been involved with a family or a person or a neighborhood, if that person or family or neighborhood continues on the behavior or the patterns that are putting them in acutely elevated risk, well, then the hub's not worth it. Why? We shouldn't even have done it, and we're not going to pursue it. Had a high school principal confront me once and say, well, I had a kid that I referred to the hub, and he's not any better. Well, I kind of challenged him and I said, well, what if my daughter has got a 30% average in math? Should I just stop sending her to school? No, because you have to work at it. You have to keep going. People are complex. People are dynamic, especially people that are facing levels of composite risk, be that mental health, addictions, criminality, victimization, or any combination of all of them. You're not going to fix people. All you can do is give them every opportunity to fix themselves. And the second bullet there, as it pertains to privacy, have cases or perform case management. That's why the hub is not an entity, because, excuse me, if the hub becomes an entity, then there has to be all these provisions for information access. There has to be protocols in terms of dealing with complaints, all that type of stuff. And what we found out when we were coming up with this hub model is we don't need any of that because all the partner agencies at a hub already have that. So we would just be replicating something that's already existed, and complicating things needlessly. So it does not have cases or perform case management. That function exists and it lies with the partner agencies. So if police want to case manage something that comes out of a hub, go for it. But that's the police's responsibility, not the hub table. So why hub? Well, provincially supported, which is important because, like I said, a bunch of initiatives in my career, 200, most of them fizzled. Why? Because it's not supported. They're launched, and then if they're not really kept on top of and they're not being supported and they're not being pushed ahead, things tend to degrade. Whole system integration and collaboration. It's not just about everybody working from their individual agency any longer. While there are definitely responsibilities that belong with agencies, crime necessarily belongs with the police, child protection, same thing as social services. But there is room for collaboration and integration so that we can help each other out. Creative solutions to complex problems. Well, all you can do is what you can do, and what better place to come up with a strategy than having 20 people at your disposal to help you out with your issue. Risk-driven, not incident-driven. We are trying to get to a person by design before the incident, before the crime, before the victimization, before the child apprehension. We want to get in before, and I'll speak to that again in a bit. Immediate interventions. One of the reasons that we have been giving a level of blessing from the Privacy Commissioner's Office in terms of speaking about people without their immediate consent is because the notion of we want to get to them before something even worse happens to them, and it's pretty tough to justify doing that if you're going to wait 3, 4, 5 weeks before you actually go and talk to that person. Evidence-based, again, we need to know what we're doing. We need to be able to prove it. We need to hang our hat on it for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is for the client's benefit. We need to know what's going to work, what works well, and keep doing that. Identifies gaps in the system delivery and influences systemic change. For anybody that has not really understanding what a gap in the system means, I'll give you a quick scenario. One of the gentlemen we spoke about at a hub discussion in PA, he was an older fellow. He was on some supplemented income, and his rent went up. And I think there was a difference in what he could pay and what his rent was going to be of about $40. And so this guy was going to get evicted. And he was not of poor health, but not great health. I think he was a diabetic. The system, left unchecked or left kind of unchallenged, was pretty content to just let this guy be evicted. And yeah, if he needs help, he can go to the ER. And yeah, if he needs meals, he can go to wherever and he'll get them. Rather than actually taking the time to find, where can we find $40 for this guy so we don't need to spend thousands on the back end because his diabetes flares up or he gets, some type of health issue. That's what I mean by a gap in the system. Sometimes when you have a complicated system like our human services system, there's going to be gaps, and sometimes a real quick fix is going to save not only money, but it's going to prevent any harm from coming to different clients. Talk a bit about the whole notion of a silo. It's kind of a catchphrase or a buzzword in this whole hub model. I remember working in Edmonton, Southside Edmonton, which is half the city, which was pretty daunting for me when I first moved there, because I'd never even been there before, never mind policing it. 2 shootings happened at the exact same time on opposite ends of the division. So, as I'm sure you can appreciate, when that happens, it takes up a lot of resources. So every patrol unit in the south side was busy on one of these shootings. We were calling in units from other divisions to come and help with the call volume. And there was a call that came in from a Safeway, and it doesn't matter where. And the loss prevention officer was in a fight with somebody because they had been there for an hour and a half, and they were starting to get restless, and they were calling for police. Well, there's no police. They were all tied up. So the dispatcher, and I'll never forget it, gets on the air and calls a traffic car. He says, listen, we're absolutely getting hammered with calls here. Can you please go and take this shoplifter at Safeway? He's getting really violent with the loss prevention officer there. Well, this guy gets on the air and says, no, I'm a traffic car. Get a patrol car. Well, you're a bloody policeman. Like, talk about a silo. Like, this guy was not going to go and do a patrol work because he was trafficked. That's what I mean about a silo. That's what I mean about, I'm only doing my piece, you do your piece, I'll do my piece, and hopefully it'll all work out. The hub model hopes to break that down, to get everybody to understand that your problem as a teacher is my problem as a police officer. If you have a kid that is acting up in class, or is not coming to school, or is exhibiting all of these type of risky behaviors, maybe coming to school high, maybe going home at lunch to get high. Yeah, they're not my issue right now as a police officer, but they're going to be. So why not help the teacher on the front end to intervene on that kid, find out why he's coming to school high, why he's going home to get high, where's his mom, and what does he need to, get back on track. Because left unchecked, he's going to be a police agency's problem. Increased client trust. Some of the reporting back that we're getting from a lot of folks is that they appreciate only having to tell their story one time. So in many cases of victimization or some real significant type of harm event or addictions, you don't want to tell that story to 5 different people 5 times. If you can tell it once and just kind of get it on the table and then move on, it's better. And it allows agencies to focus on the core business, yet provide coordinated response. So the criminal matters are still going to be investigated by the police, but at least for certain things, some of the smaller type of incidents that we're dealing with as police or education or whatever, you have some new partners you didn't have before. in education, social services, health, all that type of stuff. So this is accurate except for the community of Melfort. And I believe Melfort represents our 13th hub? Anna? 12th hub. Is the mayor from Battleford here, by the way? I owe you a drink, by the way, for not punching me in the mouth over some of the treatment that you got initially.
Okay, I'll take you up on that.
North Battleford was, I think, the first to replicate. And it was at a time when Be PRC was kind of more bureaucratic and a little more stick handling was from Regina. And one of the lessons that we really learned from Battleford, and thank goodness they were extremely patient with us, is that you can't have a local initiative, which is what we want these hubs to be, and then tell them how to do it. And we learned a lot from Battleford in that providing a framework and providing some consultation and some support, but letting those people do their job the way they know how in their community can't be dictated from Regina. And it definitely can't be dictated from a policeman from PA. So North Battleford is very, very valuable for us, and they were extremely patient with us, all of them, that while we got our act kind of sorted out and how we, as the BPRC, really wanted to do business. And I think we're in a much better position because of the efforts of Battleford. So I think there's a few more kind of wanting to replicate with this hub model. And one of the things that we are learning and we are kind of choosing to consider with this whole idea of hub replication is if a hub isn't necessarily the best fit for a community in terms of maybe their services capacity, maybe their agencies, traditional histories, or depending on how they work together, just because maybe they're not a best fit for a hub doesn't mean that there can't be something else for them. A hub model, by its nature, exists to connect people to services that they may or may not be connected with in the past. And one of the things that it's kind of important to remember for our point when we're talking about communities in terms of replicating a hub is if you're going to get somebody that's going to agree to connect to a service and you don't have it, then your credibility is impacted significantly. So the hub model is something that's evolving. We're trying to make it work for every community, but we also recognize that, there's something that can happen in perhaps maybe a smaller community that may not be a hub, but can still be effective. So then, coming out of the Ministry of Justice, there is a renewed commitment and importance on building an evidence base. So they like the hub model, they like the service it delivers, they like the concept, but they also have a requirement that we want to learn from you as a province. So de-identified information at every hub table is inputted into a data collection system that is in use by every hub in the province. And the database is secured and housed in the Ministry of Justice. And it's all de-identified because we don't need to know clients for our purposes provincially. All we need to know is what the risk patterns are. Because, quite frankly, the issues going on in Prince Albert in terms of risk and what clients are facing probably is a little bit different from, say, Moose Jaw. On any given weekend, and I'm not going to pick on Moose Jaw because I wish I had that problem as a police officer, but in PA we arrest more people on a weekend than Moose Jaw has calls for service. So it's different. And that's not to say one's better or one's not, it's just different. And in terms of aligning services and aligning resources and figuring out how we're going to make it better, we need to have a picture of what we're dealing with, and it needs to be something that we can prove and that we can quantify. That's why the province is really pushing, and it's non-negotiable for a hub. If you want a hub, you have to do this. That's part of the provincial requirement in terms of having support from the BPRC. And it's not onerous, and it's actually for every community's benefit to do that, because then every community can then advocate for themselves. So if they believe they have an issue, chances are from a report being driven out of hub statistics, they can use that. So if Swift Current wants to know what its child protection situation is like, they can get that information from child protection. But if they choose to, they can also get it from a hub. And that stands for analysis at the local, regional, and provincial level. And just to illustrate what it looks like, when I talk about we're not interested in the client, we're only interested in the risk, that's kind of what I mean. You can't really see the fields there, but fields say discussion number, originating agency, a number of times discussed. There's a domestic violence bullet there because we're finding out that domestic violence is unfortunately much worse in the province everywhere than anybody really ever knew. And then it comes to the lead agency. And basically, we just want to know who's doing what with these hub discussions so that we have a better picture of not only the risks going on, but who's involved in working on them. And it's not to scrutinize. It's to actually give credit to the agencies that are participating in this type of endeavor. There's 102 risk factors that every hub table in the province uses to measure risk in the community. So if Sally Jones, age 14, is brought up as a discussion at a hub table, there's 102 risk factors that have been developed, and it continues to evolve. There used to be 104, now there's 102. Just tracking the risk. And so, for example, we've got up there alcohol. There's 5 different bullets for alcohol. Alcohol abuse by a person, abuse in the home, use by the person, harm caused by alcohol abuse, and history of alcohol abuse. The reason we did that is because, you know what, we're trying to eliminate some of the guesswork in terms of alcohol, because if alcohol use was just the risk factor, well, I use alcohol and I don't think I'm at acutely elevated risk. My wife might disagree with me, but I don't think I am. And again, we're just tracking the risk. We don't want to know the people. We don't care. It's not that we don't care about the people, but those agencies that case manage, they're responsible for the client. The province, in terms of the Be PRC, we're just interested in the risks so we can track it. And again, I spoke a minute ago about report generation. Any community that has a hub can get a snapshot or a report of what risks their community is experiencing coming from hub discussions, probably within a few minutes. It's just a matter of typing in the variables, putting it on an Excel spreadsheet, and people smarter than me do that, because I don't know how to do it, but I can ask them to do it for me. And again, just speaking to the risk, we're not interested in people. Any questions to that point? Okay, hearing none. Privacy was and continues to be one of the biggest and most important concerns in this model, and for the bold reason that in order for a hub to work the way it's designed to work, you are going to talk about a person or a situation in a very disciplined way, in a very responsible way, but not with their immediate consent. Indeed, a person won't know that they were discussed at a hub until the intervention team, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, knocks on their door and tells them that they were discussed at a hub. So with that in mind, privacy was identified early on as being something that needs to be not only looked at right now, but into the future as well. So what was struck was called the Interministerial Information Sharing Issues Working Group. And you can't be in government to not have an acronym, so it's the ICEWG team. And they are comprised of privacy professionals from justice, health, social services, education, and some legal experts as well. And as those bullets say, they are the folks that were tasked with figuring out how we can do what we want to do as a hub team and as a hub community that's going to be legal, it's going to be responsible, and it's going to be ethical. And so in response to that, we had many meetings where we probably wanted to kill each other by the end of it to get to a mid-range, because the legislators, having no frontline experience, had their opinion. We on the front line had a polar opposite opinion, and eventually we got to somewhere in the middle. And I'll speak about that a little bit more to explain. And in 2013 of April, they drafted the Interim Information Sharing Guidelines for Community Mobilization in Hubs. And what they did was they poured through every piece of legislation that pertains to privacy. So for health, they have the Health Information Protection Act. For schools, for education, they have the Local Authority, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And what they found, from a little bit of prompting from us, because we also were looking through it, was that in every piece of legislation there exists an exemption when you can talk about somebody and you can share information, limited information, and on a strict need-to-know basis, when there is a threat of harm to that person or someone else. Now, that doesn't mean you get to talk about their uncle's, car dealership that went bankrupt 2 years ago. We're talking about what is going on in the here and now that is participating in their risk situation and what is going to contribute to their eventual harm. With that little, tiny little threshold, we came up with a methodology by way that we can do our business, and we're not done. This isn't something that's set in stone. This is something that will go on and will be scrutinized internally and externally by the Privacy Commissioner's Office, as well as the government, to make sure that it remains consistent and that everybody's doing it the same way to remain consistent with privacy. Because quite frankly, I wouldn't want anybody talking about my family without knowing it. I doubt anybody would. So it's extremely important that it's done responsibly and ethically. So they came up with a booklet. Well, I call it a booklet, but it's about 45 pages, to assist human service providers to understand their privacy obligations. I was surprised not only at my colleagues, but also at myself, how little I knew about my authority as a police officer to share information. In fact, I didn't know any, because it wasn't my problem before. Because I never did it before. So it sets out privacy legislation requirements in Saskatchewan, and it confirms parameters where information sharing is permitted. And it's all about that notion of risk. It's all about that notion of, if we don't talk about this person in a disciplined and protected manner, something bad is going to happen to them, and we're not permitted, or we're not prepared to wait for the tragedy before we're going to intervene. We just kind of dug in our heels on that one and actually continue to this day. And it outlines the four-filter approach. I will describe the four-filter approach to you because it is the safeguard process for every discussion that happens at a hub table. And I'll show that to you because I think it really kind of ties everything together in terms of the privacy impacts and the information sharing. So the privacy legislators and the analysts, they said, you can't just talk about risk as this nebulous, abstract term. You need to articulate what the hell you mean by risk, because everybody has a different understanding, perspective, or acceptability of what risk is. So, again, more meetings. We poured over this stuff, and this is what we came up with. It's overly simplified. There's a little more to it than this, but acutely elevated risk for the purposes of a hub discussion means the degree of a probability of harm plus how it cuts across multiple human service disciplines. And I'll give you an example. One of the early hub discussions in PA was about a 17-year-old boy, who was lower functioning. He had alcohol abuse, and I think he was an IV drug user too. A little bit of criminality, not a lot, but a little bit. And he was homeless, living under the Diefenbaker Bridge in PA. To me, as a police officer living and working in PA, yeah, that's acutely elevated level of risk. Something bad is going to happen to that guy, be it environmental or he's going to get robbed or something bad is going to happen to this guy. We need to get involved. And it was somebody from another agency that I won't name said, I don't see any risk here. And I kind of cocked my head and I said, what do you mean you don't see risk here? Well, he's got an addictions counselor, so he's not at risk. Well, I beg to differ. I think there's a lot of people that are connected to some things that are still at risk. So we had an argument, and I won. So we eventually talked about this fella at a hub discussion. And unfortunately, it didn't end well. This young fella ended up killing somebody. But that really kind of speaks to the need for, at 17, at 14, at 12, maybe even as early as 8, when's too late? And some of the research that we're seeing, and I'm pleased to announce that some of the initiatives going on, is that there's going to be consideration for intervention at the prenatal stage. So any mom going into maternity is going to be offered a questionnaire. And if they need help, it's going to be offered to them in the maternity room, not at an office if you make an appointment in 3 weeks and you try and get yourself here because we can't afford to bring you here. It's going to happen in maternity. So I'm very pleased to announce that. A little bit of a simplified illustration. This is to represent, or at least it's intended to represent, an individual's pathway with increasing risk, as well as the systemic response to it. So what we have at the low risk stage is primary prevention. So that means, the picture on cigarette pack. That might mean a PR campaign about getting your kids vaccinated. I don't know. The poster in the liquor store about no thanks, I'm pregnant, all that stuff. That's the primary prevention piece, where it's the low risk, low impact, just kind of gentle reminders that here's what's available to you if you need some help. As things increase and the system gets more involved, we have traditional services. So that might mean addiction services, that might mean some mental health counseling, that might mean, in certain cases, perhaps police involvement, education, whatever. Something to speak to. Things are escalating, things are getting a little worse, but there's still traditional services there that you can use. They're still there. They never leave. And then I have up there the mandated response. So that's when the risk really gets increased, and the services that were before offered are kind of like not up to you anymore. So you're under arrest. We are apprehending your kids. You are, in certain cases with youth, we have youth drug and detoxification legislation. Just something that is imparted on you without your blessing because you've done something or you are in a situation that requires it. Where the hub intends to intervene is right there. I wish it was a little closer to the middle because it's still, in my mind, getting too close to the incident or the tragedy that too many people are encountering. But in terms of the way privacy legislation is set out right now and the exemptions that exist, this is as close as we can get with blessing from the privacy people. And that's not a slight against them, because those are the people that are responsible for making sure that we live in a world or in a democracy that we're entitled to live our lives freely. The sweet spot right there is that something is about to happen. We need to intervene right now, with or without their consent. Hopefully with, but we're not going to let something bad happen to them just so that we have authority to then intervene. And again, I wish it was closer to the middle, but here's where we are right now, and we'll work with what we can from there. Questions at this point? Okay. So I'm going to outline the four-filter approach here. Sorry, please.
Yeah, Rick Aikman, CAMSAC. This is more geared, I would think, from what you're talking to, is the younger person and developing the stage. What do you do the criminal that's already out there is you sort of missed that. He's progressed through the system. I mean, and even with the kids, I find that, your social services aren't there where they should be there on the Friday night when something goes down.
Yeah.
That comes back to the policeman on the beat.
Right.
So, how do you get them involved? How do you get the social services out to his place on Friday night before it happens?
Great question. It looks like we key on youth and that we're primarily interested in youth. Well, the fact of the matter is that's where you get your best bang for your buck. Now, nobody would be declined services or denied involvement at a hub table because they were older. And in fact, they happen. They do. And to answer your question, those services about the kind of the reactive things, so the Friday night we're social services, and I absolutely agree, and I've been there. That's kind of the mandated response part. So what we're discussing at a hub is that you can still have that mandated response, and what we're hoping for is that the social services folks that go there to a house on a Friday night, or the police, or maybe both of them together, will also consider what's going on other than the disruption at the Friday night. And I'll give you an example. In my career, and it was when I was a patrol officer in PA, I went to a family fight type call. It's, you know, not run-of-the-mill, because none of them are run-of-the-mill, but no crime. It was just disruptive, you know, argy-barg, and some booze was involved, and but nothing really too heated. So we did all the proper steps, you know, made sure that there's no criminality, made sure that there's no injuries, took a look at the kids in a child protection matter. No, there's sober adults there. Okay, check. Okay, it looks like I'm done. And I remember walking out of the kitchen of that townhouse, and I'll never forget it because I feel guilty about it now, was there the dad, when I was talking to him, and we were just kind of leaving, pulls a little pie plate of fries out of the oven, and he just put them on the ground. And then 4 kids come in from the living room and sit down on the dirty kitchen floor, and they're eating fries off the floor. And at the time, I remember it striking me thinking, like, oh, that's a little weird. But now, it would be, okay, that's not right. It's not something that you can be prosecuted for. I'm not going to arrest you over that. I'm not going to judge you over that. But do you need a kitchen table? Can I put a call into Habitat for Humanity or something? Do you need a table? And so that type of thing. So to answer your question, I know I've kind of gone around it, but the hub takes into account the entire risk situation. So the Friday night party or whatever, what else is going on? What caused that? Why is that going on? Is that somebody in the house? Are there kids in there that are, you know, if it's 3 in the morning, are they going to go to school? You know, and that type of thing. So follow-up phone call to the school the next day. What school do you go to? Oh, you go to St. John's? Okay. Maybe making a phone call to St. John's that next day saying, did so-and-so show up because, you know, they were up pretty late last night. So it's that type of thing. So again, we don't want the mandated response. We don't want to just Band-Aid things anymore, because we did that. We continue to do that, and here's where we are because of it. And it's not the fault of the people. It's not the fault of the systems. The reason for that is because we've been so ingrained into us that you can't talk to somebody about somebody without their consent. And if you do, God help you. Well, what we've discovered is there's a mechanism, and it's the hub model, that in a certain set of prescribed situations of risk, yes, you can, to a limited degree. Does that make sense? Or did I really, really go around like a politician on that one? Kind of? Oh.
Good afternoon, Dale. Good to see you. Thanks for your presentation.
My pleasure.
Recently, I was present at a presentation on VITRA, the Violent Threat
Yes.
Assessment Protocols. And, you know, I was very impressed with what I was hearing there. Of course, the same people are at the same table. The HUB and VITRA
Yes.
assessment are very, very similar in that sense.
Yes.
But I did, and again, not being a professional and not knowing all of the intricacies of this, I felt the VITRA protocols were less prohibitive, more empowering than the hub protocols. Am I correct in that?
I would agree
Or
with you.
Can we get to that level? Because again, the same professionals are there.
Yep.
The same professionalism is there. The same privacy issues
Yep.
are being addressed, and yet
Yes.
it just didn't seem to be the right
Yeah.
right mix.
Great question. VITRA, and I'm very familiar with VITRA. It's Violence Threat Risk Assessment for those that aren't familiar with it. And actually the gentleman that created it, I've got to know quite well, and he's absolutely brilliant. VITRA uses it's not based on the school shootings, but it kind of is. And they use those as the most significant and, gut-wrenching truth that in certain situations that ought to be predicted, serious violence can occur. Well, they had a lot of research, and Kevin Cameron, who is the executive director of the Canadian Centre for Threat Assessment and Trauma Response, he comes from a clinical background too, so he's really good at writing papers. He's really good at case studies and investigations, and he's got a whole bunch of case studies. I think he's up to about 3,000 or 4,000 now, where a certain set of circumstances led to serious violence, and he's leveraged that really well. But it's targeted violence. This is going to happen to this person at this time, and it's something that you could really hang your hat on a lot more than some nebulous risk, meaning addictions, mental health, plus truancy, plus uncle that just got released from the pen is now sleeping on the couch. It's a little more ambiguous in the hub setting, and I think that when I say we want to get more to the middle and not so close to the tragedy before we can talk to people, I think once we build an evidence base and once we can really show and once we can really illustrate that we know what we're talking about, we'll be able to do that. But for right now, we kind of have to stick pretty close to the margins, so to speak. But for anybody that is not aware of VITRA, cctatr.com or .ca, Canadian Centre for Threat Assessment Trauma Response. I'm a huge fan of Kevin Cameron, and I would absolutely recommend it to anybody who just wants to kind of have a quick read, because his work is really, really incredible. It's absolutely incredible. So thanks for that. Any other questions? Okay. So the first filter in the 4-filter safeguard approach at a hub table. Quite frankly, your agency can't deal with it by yourself. So the police go into a house and they can deal with the criminality, but they have very, very little influence and very little authority over perhaps the substance abuse that's going on in the home. There's very little they can do about some presenting mental health issues. Not much they can do about this person's housing. Perhaps they're about to be evicted, all that type of thing. So when any agency is presented with a scenario that they have exhausted their traditional mandate and their traditional authority, and there's still all of these composite risks that exist, that is then what is the first filter. If it's something that is just exclusive to criminality, and it rarely is, but if it's just exclusive and we can deal with that, then it's not suitable for a hub. We're expected to deal with that as a lone agency. Second filter is presentation of a de-identified scenario. So somebody might say, or if I was a police officer, I would say, I recently dealt with a 14-year-old female, or I would say a female youth, because we don't use ages anymore. I'm presenting a female youth. She was found passed out at the skateboard park last night. She's got marks in her arms that are consistent with cutting behavior. And when we went to, when we picked her up and she was cleared by EMS or the hospital, and we took her back to her mom's house, mom was there and she was drunk, and she's being really, really aggressive to police and aggressive to the daughter. Would anybody agree that, or would anyone disagree that that is not an acutely elevated risk situation? So then, hearing none, we'd move on to the third filter, which is the preliminary discussion. Now, limited identification happens at this point, and this is the point where a lot of people feel some discomfort, because this is the part where we name the person. So, Sally Jones is my hub scenario. Her date of birth is 2001, January 1st, and if there's duplicate entries on your system, I can also say her address is this agency. So then notes are taken only by the participating agencies who need to continue to be involved. So, for example, if there was no criminality involved in this, as a police officer, I might offer my services having dealt with this person just most recently. But if there's no criminality, if the other partner agencies, so perhaps youth addictions and maybe mental health and maybe the education rep would like to deal with it without the police, just for whatever reason, then that's fine. But those three agencies would then kind of take some notes. And their notes that they take at a hub discussion remain the property of their agency. So anything that schools writes down about Sally Jones becomes part of their file. And the big question is, do connections to services exist? Because if we're going to use the argument that we're talking about this person because we want to offer them services. We're not being punitive. We don't want to scrutinize them or punish them. We would just want to offer them services. If they already are connected to services, then the expectation is, okay, we're not going to talk about this person at Hub anymore, but there's an expectation that whichever agencies are connected to this person should go and touch up again, because obviously it's not very good. And again, the third question here is, acutely elevated level of risk still there? Usually it is. And I'm going to use a personal example for this part because, well, it's incredible actually. In the city of PA, so 38,000 or however many people live there, there's a gentleman who is my height, is bald, about my build. His wife has the same name as my wife. His wife's middle name is the same as my wife. And his name is Matt Gray. He gets my calls all the time. And without knowing that we're talking about the right Matt Gray, if we're discussing my doppelganger, for example, without knowing who he is and without knowing his proper identity, they might come to me and talk to me about his issues. And that's a bigger privacy breach than talking about somebody with the intent to help them without their consent. So that's why we have the third filter there. Just minimal identification, just so we know who the heck we're talking about. Then the fourth filter is the insistence that whoever is going to participate in the eventual mitigation strategy, whatever that takes place as a meeting or a case conference or a family conference or whatever's going to work, only those people are going to be talking about what they're going to do. So if I'm not part of this mitigation strategy or this risk mitigation plan, then I don't need to know what they're going to do. Only those people that are involved with this client, this person, are going to know what happened. So one of the things coming out of this hub development, it's gotten some fairly significant notoriety nationally. And in Prince Albert, we kept getting requests to sit in, research and fact-finding or what have you. And the Privacy Commissioner said, absolutely not. No way, no how. The only way that you are going to get kind of approval or I guess, allowance from that office, that privacy office, to do this type of work is to make sure that only people that are in the human services and have something to offer to these people are going to sit in on these meetings. So people that wanted to learn about it were really kind of hamstrung. So what we did was we came up with this Moodle as the software, and it's online e-learning. It's kind of like an online course for human service professionals. But what it has built into it is a forum page where you can ask sector-specific questions, and then anybody else who's part of this community online can answer that question for you if they have the answer. So for example, if I'm a police officer, I would go into the law enforcement forum, and I would say, I have a question about discretion. If I am involved in a hub-related risk mitigation plan or meeting or what have you, if I see something that I'm not comfortable letting go or not exercising, maybe a child protection issue, maybe there's open drugs or what have you, what should I do? And then people that have been involved in the hub experience for however long can answer that question. Some would say absolutely not. In a child protection issue, child protection trumps hub. If you are talking to somebody and you say a child protection matter, the hub activity is over and it becomes a child protection matter right now. And that type of thing. So next steps, ongoing attention to privacy impacts and development of operational protocols. Basically, what that means is privacy and the information sharing concerns will never be put to bed. They will always be looked upon and reviewed and made sure, because if there's anything that is going to tear apart a community and their hub, or actually any collaborative model for that matter, it's going to be a privacy breach. It's going to be somebody stepping out of the boundaries of talking about somebody without their consent, and that could mean a whole bunch of things. That might mean somebody referring somebody to the hub because they are mad at them for some reason and getting them in trouble. That might be, oh, my file load is so huge. Man, if these hub folks could just go and talk to them, I could write this one off. It could be anything. The hub is designed for those situations of acute elevated risk and the immediate mitigation and intervention on those. A growing partnership with the province of Ontario. Ontario has, I believe, 12 or probably more by now hubs. They call them situation tables, but they're based on the identical principles that were developed in Saskatchewan. They use the exact same data collection software that we do. CRM is what it's called out of Microsoft. It's actually customer relations management that they tweaked for us. And with the understanding that whatever they develop, and if they make any adjustments or something to make it better, or if they have any type of developments in terms of privacy, then they'll share that with Saskatchewan. So it's evolving into a pretty strong partnership. Alberta too, Manitoba, we're getting requests from. Basically, people are understanding that, you know what, it's okay now to work with your partners, but we just need to know how that'll work. How can we do it? And the last bullet there, have education and consultation with Government of Saskatchewan ministries. There's still some confusion. There's still some mistaken belief that a hub is something that it's not. There's still a lot of people that think, to your point, if we have Vitra, why do we need a hub? They're very similar. They're based on the same principles about multidisciplinary collaboration when presented with a certain set of risk factors. Basically, we need to all be on the same page to understand that hub is not case management. A hub table is not about relieving anybody of work. A hub table is about intervening in a situation of acutely elevated risk so that there isn't the tragedy that happens, or there's not the incident that happens where somebody at a very high cost to not only the client but the taxpayer is going to have to fund. We want to get upstream on these things before they enter into the system because it's way, way too hard to get out. And I have a quote there. It's actually from a gentleman named Cal Corley, who used to be he used to be in charge of Canadian Police College, long time RCMP member. And he put it very, very, very well. It says, the goal of every hub should be to work itself out of business. The whole notion of relying on your human service partners, leveraging them, trusting them, talking to them, you shouldn't have to have a meeting called a hub to do that. At some point, everybody should incorporate information sharing, partnerships, collaboration into their day-to-day business. Now, you're still responsible at your agency for, in education. Yeah, you're still in charge of teaching kids. But just know that you have a whole bunch of people that are ready to help you out if you need it. And that is it, and I'm welcome to any questions. Anything at all.
So you're certainly welcome to come to the microphone. And while the lady's doing this, I'm just going to remind you about name and where you serve from. But also I'm going to remind you that on February the 16th, that week, if you go to the SUMA website, this session and all other educational sessions will be posted on there so your colleagues as well as you can have a look-see. Please ask.
Hi, I'm Brandy from the Town of La Flèche, administrator. This is a great model, but in a population below 500 with limited police services and no other human services, how would something like this help youth or at-risk people in our communities?
Well, a hub might not fit. It would kind of be like, a pickup truck might be more advantageous on a grid road than a Corvette, right? So, and please, I'm not calling the hub a Corvette. I'm just illustrating. that's the trick that the BPRC, my colleague Anna is here as well, is we acknowledge that there's going to be a fit. And the hub, by its design, is about connecting to services. And it's about collaboration, multidisciplinary. Well, if you only have one Mountie and maybe you get child protection services once a week, or maybe they'll fly in a mental health counselor, or whatever the circumstances might be, you're absolutely right. Because how do you offer services that aren't available, right? And that's part of the challenge and the new task that Anna and I have given ourselves is, okay, if not a hub, then what? Because you should still be able to collaborate, and there's still principles that have been developed in terms of information sharing, risk identification. All those things exist. So what mechanism can you have that you have the capacity for? And that might be, the sky's the limit. You know what, it might be something in health where mental health counselor via Skype. I don't know. But I mean, we're looking at it. We're looking at everything. Every possibility, any possibility, the sky's the limit. Because, quite frankly, it's important enough to do that, for sure. Thank you. Anything? Good. Okay. Oh, question.
Hi, I'm Crystal. I'm not actually a delegate. I'm here to check out SUMA, and I'm from Regina. I'm just wondering, has there been any sort of engagement with you and the people you're working with that are developing this on a policy level, that are looking at what you're doing and seeing, looking for advice or working with you to go to that next level of
policy level
changing
in government or within agencies?
Within the government or whichever.
Yeah, it's ongoing. I mean, this, anybody that, I don't know if anybody here has actually worked in human services, but it really represents a 180-degree turn in the way we used to do business. And that reflects itself in the policy as well. When I talked about the information sharing issues working group, we could not get through, and still can't in many cases, to a lot of those folks because they're unfamiliar with it, that sometimes when you are ridiculously addicted or have a significant mental health issue, or you've had so much tragedy in your life that you just are probably just traumatized, something that we couldn't even imagine, perhaps you're not in the best frame of mind to consent to people that just want to help you out. We couldn't get that through to them. And my colleague that I mentioned a minute ago, Kevin Cameron, he's a little more blunt than I am. He says, in his mind, and I agree with him, it's actually more unethical to stand idly by and watch a situation degrade into tragedy than it is to intervene in good faith and with good intentions in a responsible and ethical manner. That conversation will never go away, and I think in a lot of cases we have to kind of agree to disagree with some policymakers and some frontline people as well, I'm not going to lie. But the fact of the matter is that's why it's been so important to have the support from municipalities. My chief is a supporter of this, and he's let me work for the province for the last 2 years and help develop this when he could quite easily call me back to fill an operational capacity. It's so important to have strong leadership to push this ahead because it's worth doing, and the partnerships that are created out of it, never mind the statistics or just put those aside for a sec about the reductions in ER visit, whatever. Put that aside for a second. The very fact that human service professionals are getting to know one another personally, professionally, and beginning to appreciate and understand the limitations and just what it is, in fact, that they do for a living, already puts you in a greater stead for that community. So it's going to be an ongoing conversation. Policymakers kind of like neat and tidy, but anybody that's worked in human services knows that it can be an ugly business sometimes. So we just have to keep working on that. Yes, please, you can.
Can I ask you to go to the microphone? Sure. Yeah. Please.
Yeah, so I'm Anna Robinson. I'm a colleague of Matt's as well. So just a piece to the policy point that you're making, I think it's really important that we're facing is that piece around practice influencing policy. And so trying to overcome as well, because what we've noticed is that individual human service agencies now are wanting to create their own policies around hub within their own ministry and their own agency. So we're working as well to ensure that there isn't that barrier to around people in policy positions who don't sit at the hub table or understand or have that same notion, as well as getting the different ministries to collaborate amongst policymakers so that there aren't those silos happening amongst policymaking as well.
Thank you.
Rick Aikman from Campsack again. We as as councillors and mayors and administrators of towns, how do we get a hub in our area? How do we go about that? And has the government got any spare bucks so that they can allow people to come and have these hub meetings? And and what people don't have extra or do have extra time that they can have these meetings on a regular basis?
Well, that's why the leadership is so important, because hubs are free. Everybody that is involved in a hub does it in addition to their day-to-day duties. And in terms of how does a community get a hub, well, you contact either Anna or myself, or we have a couple more colleagues in the province, and we'll come and we'll meet with the community, the stakeholders, and we'll do kind of an informal kind of capacity analysis to make sure that if we're going to put a hub in a community, well, it has to succeed, because it would be too hard to try something, put it on kind of uneven ground, have it not work well, and then do it again. It's just too tough, because you know what? It's hard work. It's like I said, in addition to your normal duties. When I was with Family Protection with the PA Police Service, hub involvement occupied about 40% of my time. So I stayed late on a lot of nights. I adjusted my schedule because I wanted to do it. And so the answer to your question, how do you get one? Give us a shout. We can come and meet with you, and then we'll figure out where to go from there.
Matthew, I'll just pick up on that. So
Sure.
the contact information is what? Go to, is there a website, or is there?
Yeah. www.saskbprc.com is our website. I wish I had brought cards, but you have some? Okay. My colleague has brought some cards. She's much more prepared than I am. So.
Okay, so you know that the lady in the front here has some
Yeah.
cards. Thanks.
Martin Ring, City Councillor, City of Prince Albert. Hello, Matthew. Certainly, I've been involved at the Police Commission level, was involved right from the onset of the hub and core, certainly in Prince Albert. So I know the benefits of what it's provided our community. Just the only point I wanted to make to people is that it's not the magic bullet. It's not going to be instant as well. Point for people to keep in mind is that don't think that you're going to set up a hub and within a month or 2 months you're going to see crime stats drop and bottom out, and it takes time. We've had a society issue that has brought us to this point, and you can't correct it real quick, and people have to keep that in the back of their mind, that it's a process that has to continue. We have to continue to work with it, and I just hope that whether it's provincial, federal, and even the municipalities just continue to stick with it, because it is taking time. But we're definitely seeing the results. I do know that.
Well, thanks very much, Marty. Yeah, and you're absolutely right in that it's one model. There's outstanding work going on everywhere that deserves recognition. Hub has gotten some notoriety because of the support that it's received in government. But make no mistake, at every corner and in every agency, there's people doing some brilliant work, and they're worthy of recognition too. And it's just making sure that people that want to work together are given a path to follow that's going to permit them to do it. And that's our role in the Be PRC, is to make sure that people that want to work together can do so, and that they're given an environment that'll allow that to happen, for sure. So.
Lance Cornwell. I'm a councillor with the town of Strasbourg. And I just want to ask, do privacy issues hamper you from fulfilling your mandate?
No, but I'm not going to lie to you, we could be a lot quicker if we didn't have to consider them. But I resented privacy when we were initially going through it, because all I wanted to do was help people. but it's not that simple, because I know how I would feel if people knew about my family and I didn't know about it. The way the hub works, though, and the nice thing about it, is that when you introduce yourself to a person who is used to having your will imposed upon them as a police officer or a child protection worker, when you go and introduce yourself to that person and you tell them that you're not there to take their kids and you're not there to arrest them, but you've observed a pattern of behavior that's going to lead to that, they're very receptive to it. I think in Prince Albert, I think in 12 or 100 or more discussions, I think they've been actually told about sex and travel twice. That because when you do it properly and you tell somebody that, you know what, I'm not here about that, I'm here because, you know what, this is getting bad and we don't want it to get any worse, and all we're here to do is connect you to services that you might not have heard about, it's usually well received. It's usually quite well received.
The reason I asked that, we're a small community, between 750 and 800. A group in our town had every year for quite a few years a welcome neighbor night, and any new people that moved to our community were welcome to the neighborhood.
Yep.
We do not even have access to who is moving to our communities nowadays.
Okay.
So we don't know our neighbors anymore. We used to know everybody. We don't know our neighbors. We get a lot of social services people moving to our town, a lot of Aboriginal people now, things like that. We can't welcome them to our town. We can't get to know who they are without bumping into them on the street, knocking on their door, taking the apple pie over and say, welcome, that kind of thing. It used to be a great function for the elderly. They used to be able to meet who their new neighbors are, things like that.
Right.
And I just wondered, you know, in your group, the way you guys are doing your hub initiative, is it not proactive to have communities pull together and be able to know who's moving to their communities?
I'll answer your question with something that became abundantly clear and still does to this day. People's perception of privacy is very different what the legislation says. There are people in every human service sector that think they can't when they actually can. So to answer your question, sometimes you think you can't when you absolutely can. And when I spoke a minute ago about not knowing my authority as a policeman for information sharing, it's because it never really occurred to me. And it's easier to just say, I'm not sure, so I won't, rather than I want to, so I'll look into it. I guess to answer my question, I would just recommend, you know what, get an opinion. Because maybe there's no reason why you can't know who's moving in, either by, you know, building permit application or what have you, whatever mechanism that might be. Because if the intent is to welcome them, if like maybe there's a provision for that, I don't know. But I mean, I can definitely tell you, and still to this day, there are people that think they can, that think they can't when they can. They absolutely can. They just don't know that. Okay.
Thank you. So I appreciate all of your questions and comments. I'm going to have to put a close to it because of time. I thank you for sharing and being here to learn. I always like it when we have someone who cares about what they're doing as our presenter. So please join me in thanking Matthew.
Well, thank you.
So all of these, again, will be on SUMA website beginning on the week of the 16th. See you at Hospitality tonight.
Thank you, everyone.